Well, yeah, we've been there earlier than that. I mean, things have just changed so drastically. It's just insane. It's incredible.
She wanted to be there because her office was right up Dixie Road on the other side of 401. So she didn't have to get on any major road. And she lived in Toronto for 5 years. 500 quarter watts. Good. Now we're going for 88 days. Right side.
Longevity in your speeches, too.
Yes, there is. We're both sitting on
Well, you got to network here. I can listen to you, or I can write it down. Yeah.
Okay, so that will be considered.
You start to get on that and you just start finding
For me, it's my life. I thought you were. That's why I moved out of the way.
partway different, right? And to Montreal.
Yes, they asked me, oh, we need, so I went away, no problem. Perfect. Thank you.
Sitting in the truck out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Slides will be, yes, so it'll be after all the sharing. You'll see it all there.
Jeff just announced it, just go to the microphone and just say, because it gives us, a little bit of time to set it up.
Few winters, the whole time.
Make sure the microphones are.
8 or 9 years, I guess. They were jumping in the screen.
It's like, oh, okay, perfection.
Are you?
We got a sweet stroke until I had your cut.
Yeah, just so I can see the and then because the girl is right there at the end of the service, just say everybody please stay seated and just so if you know where to score and both Fernando and I together walk to the front, we will bow, I with you will walk the family out, Fernando will
So when you merge your nine,
Yeah.
I can't walk position, but until you do it, so it's the part video, and I'll walk straight. So I'll do my function instruction there.
But you will announce this. So he's announced the slideshow. So and he will announce the video. After the video, you and I will go here. When you're staying, the pastor, Jeff and I will be gathering out, and we're staying behind to basically yeah. Some people will also other people will announce. Oh, Jeff is going to announce that we're going to set up so people know what's happening. I just ask him that people please stay seated. The funeral directors will meet the family. So people know that's the no, you just leave it there. Eventually, you know, we can improvise and do that. Is that okay? Yeah. And then you will be the family. So it won't just be slow. If I
Chris was very good.
I just thought you could read this part of
So at the end, all I need to do is I will go around to walk around and I will do I only want you to put it on and then everybody's gone. And if I still so you're okay?
after that, then
I'm going to announce the He's quite warm in here.
Would you like to have a coffee? The two slides. They have a video, a YouTube video. Everything?
Then we have which can be challenging. In the summer, it's right. In the winter, it's usually quite
You know, in the front, there is a view family program itself. There is a light as well. So maybe this is and at one point, maybe in the end, just let people know whether it was a reception, then the guest ladies, I can take it away and just let people know.
yeah.
No, I was reading that. She has chosen that school and a Christian school. The two oldest boys who are twins just turned 16. And one of them sent me an email last night asking for my views on so I actually had to sit down for a while and think that one through. Because with respect to the entire Western I'm stuck. And I didn't particularly want to go I also had to let him know that this was his effort to be facilitizing that I was not up to.
Thank you. You may be seated, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I just want to say welcome here today. My name is Jeff Renaud, and I'm a pastor in Langley, and I just want to say it is my sincere and almost privilege to be here with us today to help us remember Chris, or I think as known by the vast majority of you and other people as simply as Skip. I'm going to call him Chris for the sake of the service here today, but you can just replace it with Skip every time you hear it if you want. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. In meeting with the family before today, they told me that they knew Chris's community was big, but that only since his passing on January 19th that they found out that Chris's community is really, really big. This is in fact just Celebration of Life 1 of 2. There's another one coming up, and it's the bigger one. Later on next month. But this one is equally important, and you're here to honor Chris, and I think by way of your presence here today, it also is a huge sign of support to the family. So thank you so much for being here. And I do want to just say to everyone who's watching online right now via live stream, welcome to you as well, and thank you so much for taking time to be a part of this online from wherever you are watching this. You are just as much a part of this celebration of Chris's life as everyone else who is here physically. So thank you for tuning in and watching this today. I understand that Chris's family and community stretched far across this country, all the way to Gander, Newfoundland, which is just over 7,000 kilometers from here, and almost as far east as you can go in Canada before dipping a toe in the Atlantic. And people are probably watching today even too from across the ocean and around the world. I think Chris's community stretched far, but his influence stretched wider to this world for sure. I want to set the tone for today by saying that there are more than one statements that can be true at one time. Let me explain. It is true today that we grieve Chris's loss. I know that he passed just over a month ago, and I know, especially for the family, but everyone here who've loved Chris, that you've all been grieving his loss from then till now. But as we focus our hearts and our minds on him today, that undoubtedly today feels different. I'm guessing that the grief feels more acute, and we are aware of just the void that Chris has left in our lives. I'll say that I think that we'll continue to grieve in some ways and in different forms for the rest of our days here on earth. I really appreciate author Earl Grolman, who says this about grief, and I just love how he says this. He says, grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. It is the price you pay for love. And he says the only cure then for grief is to grieve. Grief is the great price we pay for love. Think about this. The only reason that we are gathering here today and grieving is because we feel the deep void that Chris's loss has left in us. We realize today that we grieve because Chris loved every single one of us so much, and that love was reciprocated to him. And I just want to say as well to Tilly and Stephanie and to Adam and to the family, I know you told me, Tilly, that your life journey has been forever altered, and I know that's on behalf of your family as well. But please know that our deepest condolences go out to you. On behalf of everyone here, we all feel Chris's loss, and we feel that our heart just breaks for you guys. And though this road ahead is not ours, but it is yours to walk, please know that you are never walking it alone. Chris's community is very much your community as well. Perhaps there's another statement that's true today, and that is that we've come in to reflect perhaps on some bigger issues of life, like the relationships we have and the people that we love. Maybe even as we're thinking about life, we have questions that we come in with today, like, Why do terrible things happen to such good people? I think we all know full well we live in a broken world. It's not how it should be. And we see the effects around us all the time, but this broken world hits very close to home for us today. We come in today with way more questions than answers, and there is an unfortunate reality that there are mysteries that we just cannot answer on this side of heaven. There's another statement, though, that is true, and that is we gather to celebrate Chris today. We want to gather and celebrate him, and we celebrate so many things about him. And even as we do, we all know full well it's impossible to capture Chris today in the time that we have. We can't. There's just too much about him to capture everything. Just a few things that I want to say that in me sitting with the family and learning about Chris and being introduced to him, I found out that he was extremely caring. He was unwaveringly supportive of people and the needs around him. He had a warm personality, a great sense of humor, including his favorite character in movies in Monty Python and Fawlty Towers. And I was told that for Chris, I love this, I was told that the art of telling the joke, especially if told well, that was worth it, even if his recipients didn't get the joke at all. I found out that Chris had great taste in music, being a classic rock fan. I mentioned already his hometown in Gander that he loved. He loved his Jig's dinner, which I looked up and I was told a little about, which was his favorite, a Sunday meal that was served in Newfoundland that has corned beef and dumplings, among other dishes. And if your mouth is watering like mine, I missed lunch today, so all of that sounds really good. But speaking of food, I understand that good food in general was Chris's love language. And in all of this, we celebrate so many things, but among them, the fact that Chris was extremely humble. And he never wanted to be the star of the show. And so I would imagine that if he was here physically today or in the second celebration of life to come, that he would just honestly wonder what the fuss was all about. I want to say that Chris deserves to be in the spotlight today. He deserves our hearts, he deserves our minds, he deserves our attention and our honor. And so I'll say that we celebrate him today. And then later on, whenever we have to leave and go back to our lives, we will do so, but we will allow his legacy to continue to impact us, I think, in some ways, for the rest of our days here on earth. I understand that Chris grew up in an Anglican household, and so faith was real and authentic and honest to him. And I'm guessing that the Bible was either read by Chris or it was read in his home. He was familiar with it. And so I want to read just a few verses from the book of John. It's a book in the New Testament about Jesus' life. And Jesus gives these words, and the family has asked that I read them today, and I gladly do so. These are Jesus' words in John chapter 14. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, and trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the place where I am going." Thomas said to him, he said, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" And I love this. Jesus says, "I am the way. I am the truth, and I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And if you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." I think we've seen some of God's goodness through the people that we love in our lives and have been blessed by. And because of that, I think we've seen God's goodness through Chris in our lives. And so would you join me for a moment as we pray? Just stop and reflect, and then I'll invite a few friends to come and share. Heavenly Father, we stop today. Maybe we don't do this much, but we want to just stop. And think about maybe some of the bigger things in life. The gifts that we have, the blessings in our lives, the people that we get to do life with and share memories with and be formed by. And in this, as Chris is center stage for us today in our hearts and our minds, God, we want to say thank you for him. I feel that in a way, the word thank you is just so short-sighted, but with all of the weight that that brings, I wanted to say thank you for him. For his life, for how he saw life, for how he specifically was a blessing to literally countless people around him. We are better people and richer people for having known him. And so God, today we say thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, the first friend I want to invite up at this time is Jim Burton. Jim was a close friend of Chris's, and he worked with him for a number of years. So Jim, thank you for coming to share today.
Chris was a son, a loving husband, a devoted father, an uncle, a cousin, a friend, a mentor, and a respected leader among co-workers, union peers, and fellow retirees. Chris was witty and comical and always compassionate and trustworthy. Chris was an extremely knowledgeable person. Life events, current events, political events, geography, aircraft avionics, workplace collective agreements, workplace policies, union administration, sports, movies, cooking, and many more. But his true passion was pensions. Chris had the articulation to speak and write in a manner that would stop a room what it was doing, and everybody would listen to what he had to say. Chris was a dedicated, highly skilled aircraft avionics maintenance engineer. And I first met Chris on March 9th, 1998 in the avionics shop of the Canadian Airlines hangar in Vancouver. I was just a young kid, born and raised in Newfoundland, landed an avionics job on the other side of Canada. I didn't know it at the time, but my relationship with Chris will become one that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. My first memory of Chris is as vivid today as it was 27 years ago. Chris had a preferred location in the avionics shop, a seat in the corner of the room, and on that table was a stack of newspapers and either 1 or 2 cans of Diet Coke. As an avionics apprentice, I had the privilege to work with all of the highly skilled AMEs that were allocated to the Bay 4 work location. It was not a large crew, so my assignments were often working under the guidance of Chris. Chris was a wizard on the Boeing 747-400 and the 737. The sharing of his knowledge, troubleshooting skills, and attention to detail with aircraft record keeping formed a distinct attribute to my level of professionalism. After obtaining my aircraft maintenance license, I continued to work alongside Chris for several years. During that time, I developed a relationship with him beyond work and had the privilege to meet his family. I first met his lovely wife, Tilly, at their house Christmas party in 1999. He would bring his son, Adam, to crew golf games, and I met his daughter, Stephanie, when we were helping a co-worker with some home rentals. Back to that avionics shop for 1 second. When the work was all completed on aircraft, many people would combat the negative effects of midnight shift by taking a nap, but not Chris.
If you recall that stack of newspapers that was on the table, they weren't old newspapers. They were today's newsprint, and before Chris finished his shift, he had read every paper cover to cover. He did that every night that I remember working with him. After the merger between Canadian Airlines and Air Canada, Chris became a devoted union representative of his peers. He spent some time in the shop committee, which is a direct relationship between union members and the collective agreement and their employer. He took a profound interest in pensions and joined the pension committee. He embarked on an administrative role and became president of Canadian Airways Local Lodge 764. He expanded his union commitment to the District Lodge Executive Board. Chris served in union offices for over 2 decades. His commitment was unparalleled, and his attention to education and advocating for his peers raised the bar. In 2012, Chris and I became associates through union representation. It is during this time that I truly learned who Chris was and the depth of his character, charisma, knowledge, and writing skills. His talents were endless. Chris's union legacy is nothing short of a very well-respected leader and mentor to many that served alongside him or under committees that he led. Chris did not act or speak until he had all of the facts. Chris never gave anyone who solicited his knowledge or advice an opinion. He provided them with answers that included supporting documentation. When meetings and conventions would become heated, Chris was the guy that restored calm and order as his knowledge surpassed anybody in the room. Chris's true passion in all of the union offices that he held was pensions. I'm privileged to know this through a deep personal connection, as this is where I received my second apprenticeship from Chris. In 2015, he asked me if I would join the pension committee. At the time, he was the chair. I agreed. That day, I received an email. It had the plan text, plan handbook, actuarial valuation reports, and a series of reports that he had written throughout the years. In total, there was in excess of 600 pages, and there was one instruction. Read it and let me know if you have any questions. Chris's knowledge of pensions was contagious. I formed an interest in pensions, and that excelled my relationship with Chris. That bond would later become the gateway to the relationship that I have with his family today. Chris's true love of his pension work was the annual pension seminars that he would conduct across Canada. It was his opportunity to interact directly with co-workers and their spouse and spend 3 hours talking about his passion while educating people on retirement. His seminar had a subtle family connection in one of the slides. The screenshot of the employee portal has a location for a picture of the employee in the top corner. The employee in Chris's presentation was a photo of their family dog, Bowie. I have attended many of his seminars and facilitated many using his presentation. One of my favorite lines that showcased a little of Chris's humor was his lead-in line for the spousal benefit. It goes a little like this. If your spouse doesn't really like you, your first purchase after retirement is a cat. Whenever your spouse makes you dinner, have the cat taste test it before you eat it. It was always an icebreaker, some laughter, and ironically, it would engage spouses in the pension presentation. During COVID, I was laid off in Edmonton. In June of 2021, I was offered a recall to Vancouver. I received a call from Chris letting me know that him and his wife, Tilly, would like to extend an invitation to stay at their house if it would accept my decision to accept the recall. Although I was offered a place to stay, that is not at all what I received. I received a family. A working relationship with someone is one thing, but living with them is an entirely different platform. You get to experience people in a barrier-free context at their most basic element of everyday life. Chris was truly a gentle giant, a family man, loving and caring. He was the cornerstone of the family, always there in times of need, advice, joy and sorrow, and never short of a solution to any issue. Chris was an avid chef. He had perfected the craft of his smoker. Be it beef, turkey, chicken, pork, the taste of his finished product was consistently mouthwatering. Chris retired not long after I was staying with him in Tilly. He enjoyed our evening chats, talking about airplanes and the comedy of the workplace, co-workers. He missed the camaraderie of his co-workers, but he was quite explicit he didn't miss the commuting traffic. Although retired, Chris and Tilly would alter their dinner schedules to accommodate my schedule. If I was late, I would send him a text and he would respond, "We'll eat when you get here." Sundays were family dinners. Stephanie and her husband Seamus, Adam and his nephew Dustin would arrive for an afternoon of watching sports, conversation, sometimes a social beverage, and a wholehearted family meal. Chris loved his family and looked forward to Sunday dinners. One personal thing I learned about Chris was his writing skills were not isolated to his work life. He kept a journal of family events, journeys, and vacations. One evening, not long after Chris had passed away, I was visiting with Tilly and Stephanie and Seamus, and Tilly picked up the binder that contains the journal and read a few passages. Chris's writing craft can place you there in the moment, even though it happened 20 years ago. An outstanding talent. Tilly, Stephanie, and Adam, on the days that are heavy, pick up that journal and Chris will be right there with you. As many of you know, Chris had a distinct component of humor. He wasn't a comedian or a joke teller per se, and he certainly wasn't that person that likes to hear himself speak. His humor was in his writing or subtle one-liners in a conversation. I had messaged Chris, but he was in the hospital for a stay, and I asked him how he was feeling. His only response to me is, "Jim, I'm bored as blank. I've reached the end of the internet." Sometimes you meet someone who has a lasting impression on you. I have no doubt that Chris will be that someone for a lot of people that knew him. Chris has left an everlasting imprint on my soul. I have one last personal story to share. One evening, we ordered Chinese food from a restaurant that Chris and Tilly had been customers for over 20 years. Chris and I went to pick up the order, and the owner greeted Chris by name. And she said to him, "Is that your son?" Without a beat, Chris's response was, "Yep." That's exactly how Chris made me feel, a part of his family. Tilly, Stephanie, and Adam, you couldn't have asked for a better husband or father. My deepest friend, Chris, may you rest in peace.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing about your dad today. That was just simply incredible and so honoring. So thank you so much for speaking into Chris's life. And next, I want to invite Hedley Keynes up. Hedley's Chris's cousin, but I understand is much more like a brother. Worked together for years and really, really close. So Hedley, thank you for coming to share today.
Thanks, Jim. Can I just say ditto? Good afternoon, everyone. Like Jim has already said, we're gathering here today to pay a tribute and to celebrate the life of Chris. Chris was also my first cousin, along with being a best friend as well. We're both born in Newfoundland. Chris was born in August 1960, 21 days before I was. Though we didn't spend much time together when we were in our younger years, we did end up going to the same trade school in Gander. Chris was the year after I went. I completed my second year when Chris was in his first year. After trade school, we ended up, along with Mr. Cooper, Glenn Cooper, getting a job with Eastern Provincial Airways back in 1983. That led to a career that would be cementing a friendship that lasted 40 years plus. Then Eastern Provincial moved to Halifax, and we followed. Got to Halifax, and then CP bought us out, and so then we all trekked out to Vancouver. 1986, Expo. Our lives were intertwined in ways that went beyond work. Chris was like a brother to me. We worked together, socialized, camped together, and supported each other through life's highs and lows. Glenn and his wife Deborah had the good fortune of traveling to Ireland with Chris and Tilly, and they managed to squeeze in a couple of cruises with them as well. Good time had by all. And as Jim said, Chris was a man of intelligence, precision, integrity, and an incredible thirst for knowledge. He was meticulous when it came to reading and writing, always well-informed, always up on current affairs. But he never pushed his opinions on anyone, but instead was a steady hand, always there for those who needed advice, guidance, or just a listening ear. Something like Google. Hey Chris, what about them pensions? Recently, I asked my son Trevor for one word to describe Chris. Trevor came back with the word, excuse me. He said, strategic. I said, strategic. I said, explain to me, what do you mean, strategic? He said, well, he said, Chris was always 2 or 3 steps ahead. This was especially true in his work as president of the local lodge and the pension chair. He dedicated himself to his union from the first day until his last. Even during his hospital stays within the last 6 months, working on his laptop from a hospital bed, fighting for fairness. To ensure his fellow members had the representation that they deserved. Chris wasn't all about seriousness. During the early years in Vancouver, Chris's son, Adam, had a collection of stickers. I think they're Power Rangers, Adam.
I was over to the house. I was working overhaul. Chris was working midnights. And I looked at the stickers and I said, Chris, I said, you should put some on your toolbox at work. And I left it at that. A few days later, I went to work. And you wouldn't believe the surprise on Dave Gilder's face when he came in. And he had a toolbox on a rollaway that used to be red. But you couldn't see no red on it. It was all stickers. Power Rangers out of it. Dave took it all in good humor. And I don't know if to this day he knows who did it. Sorry, Chris. Beyond work and friendship, Chris was a family man through and through. His love for his wife Tilly was unwavering. You could never think of just Chris. It was always Chris and Tilly. Together, they shared a deep commitment to their unions, but more than that, they were partners in every sense of the word. Their children, Adam and Stephanie, were the lights of his life. Adam with his passion for sports, and Stephanie, who carries the same compassion and empathy as her mother. And those were Chris's words to me during Stephanie's wedding. And then when Stephanie married Seamus, Chris was so proud to welcome him as a son-in-law. He had just gained another family member. Sundays had become a regular get-together at their house for their families to watch football and to enjoy the great food that he and Tilly were always able to put together. And no one ever went home hungry. Chris had a heart for others. In hard and tragic times, Chris and Tilly were always there providing support in every way imaginable. They stood by us and many others, offering their wisdom, strength, and love, helping us navigate through some of the hardest times in our lives. And of course, he was handy, wasn't he, Tilly? The pantry.
Yeah.
He didn't always get things done that Tilly had on the list, but he was there to help. And back in 2002, we decided to do an addition on our house. We had 4 kids, 3 bedrooms. So we put an addition on our house. That year, my dad had died. We went home to Newfoundland to look after that. The same week, the contractor was showing up to tear our house apart. Chris and Tilly looked after that for us while we were gone. Well, when we got back, I was responsible for a few things in the house, electrical, insulation, stuff like that. And I was getting behind because I had a contractor coming in not so long of a time. So I called Chris up. I said, Chris, can you give me a hand? He said, what do you need? I said, well, I said, I'm insulating the floor of the family room, which was right above our living room. And I got to try to get this done, I said, because I think I got the contractor coming in tomorrow to put the floor down. No problem. So he came out over. And everything was going good till Chris stepped between the joists. Went through the floor with his leg. The rest of them stayed above. But once wasn't enough. He had to do it twice. It all worked out. he didn't hurt himself too bad. He laughed, and it was all good. But it was Chris there to help any way he could. So today, we say goodbye to a man who made a difference in the lives of so many. To a man who stood for fairness, loyalty, and family. And to a man who loved deeply and was deeply loved in return. Chris, we will miss you. We will cherish the memories, the laughter, and the lessons you gave us. And though you may no longer walk beside us, your spirit will always be with us, guiding us, just as you always did, 1 or 2 steps ahead. Rest in peace, my cousin, my brother, my friend.
Headley, thank you. Extremely heartfelt and just beautiful, so thank you so much for sharing. I want to share, as some of you I think may know, that on the website there's a place for people to share tributes on there, and so I want to just read 2 of them. I know there's more. And I would encourage you to go on there and just read these because they're so good. And feel free to place one yourself. But I just want to read a few. And this first one here is from Ian Gervin. Ian says, Terry and I extend our deepest sympathy to Tilly and family on Chris's passing. The first time I met Chris was when he joined the Eastern Provincial Avionics Department in Gander. My first impression was that he was a likable guy, thoughtful, and obviously smart, as he was one of only 3 hired by EPA from his technical school class. Over the years, he proved himself to be all of the above, as well as an excellent avionics tech and person who cared about and worked for the betterment of his fellow IAM employees. Rest in peace, my friend. And the second one is from Ayaz Muhammad. Last year, we mourned the sudden passing of brother Joe Toth. During his celebration of life, Chris delivered a heart-rending tribute that left an impact on us all. A few months earlier, we wished Chris better health and a speedy recovery. Now we mourn his passing and reflect on the profound impact that he has had on our lives and those of our loved ones. After the merger, I had the privilege of working alongside Chris as a fellow avionics engineer. His intelligence and ability to articulate ideas were unmatched, qualities evident in the IAM 764 President's messages and pension submissions. We are grateful for his unwavering dedication as a union activist, tirelessly advocating for workers' rights. Chris was much more than a colleague. He was a mentor and a friend who left an indelible mark on all who knew him. May his family find solace in our heartfelt condolences, and may Chris rest in peace, knowing the legacy that he leaves behind. There's so much more to share, and there's so many qualities about Chris that we can continue to talk about. I know any of you could share way more personally than I can, but if you would allow me, well, actually, I don't think you have much choice in the matter. You're sitting there and I'm going to speak. So, but if you will allow me, I want to highlight just 3 things that really stood out to me as I got to know Chris through both Tilly and Stephanie and my time with them. You'll notice familiar themes and threads all the way through this, and it's okay. I think as we continue to resonate on Chris today, we can hear these again and again and again. But first, in meeting Chris through Stephanie and Tilly, I was really impressed with Chris's knowledge and his thirst and hunger for it. As has been said here, Jim, I think you mentioned this, when he read newspapers, for example, he read them cover to cover. I think about it, when I read newspapers, especially when I was younger, I go for 2 sections. I go for the sports and the comics. Chris would read newspapers from cover to cover, and not just one specific newspaper or magazine. He had a wide range of materials that he read from, and I think this shows that he was willing to read very different points of views on subjects. He was like a sponge, wanting information all the time, specifically in the area of history and mechanics. He loved that show, How It's Made. Maybe some of you watched that. My kids think it's the coolest thing ever, and I do too. But it just seemed like Chris had a wealth of knowledge in him. I was told you never ever wanted to play Jeopardy with him because he would destroy you. And if he was ever a fan of the show Cheers, I never asked if he was or not, but I figure if he watched the show Cheers, my guess is that his favorite character was Cliff Clavin. But the thing is, a lot of people wouldn't have known that he was so smart and knowledgeable because he never flaunted it. He never showed off, and you only knew the depth of his knowledge on a topic if you asked him a question about it. He loved learning, and he loved education, and he wanted others to learn as much as they could as well. But more than knowledge, I think Chris had a ton of wisdom. And maybe this was the reason that Chris loved being a skip in curling. It's interesting, Hedley, that you talk about your son with the word strategic. Because I've said here, said that Chris could always see 2 moves ahead of his opponent. And he was always helping people understand the game of curling through understanding what was coming up, not just what you saw. Until he told me that his wisdom reached far, far beyond curling. That people sought out Chris for advice on so many areas of life. And once he was asked, he was more than happy to share and to help. He got a lot of joy and fulfillment out of helping people in whatever arena that he could help them in. Second, Chris was a relentless advocate for others. This was probably seen clearest in his work with Air Canada and the union, as you've heard. And I was told that Air Canada's pensions are the way they are in large part because of Chris, and that's a huge statement. He wanted employees to have the best possible start to retirement when the time came, and he was always a student of the system in order to help make it a win-win for everyone. And I think it's a win-win for everyone because, after all, if Air Canada had employees that knew that they were being looked after along with their families, wouldn't they be better and more motivated employees? Chris worked tirelessly. He sat on countless boards, and through Chris being Chris, kind and gentle, but intelligent and firm, he did so well to make life better for the people around him. Chris also advocated for people in terms of community. What I mean by this is that he did his best to gather people, to enjoy food together, and to get people talking and sharing about life together. This was perhaps Chris's sweet spot. Entertaining for a big event like Christmas or the Super Bowl, as has been mentioned, having the smoker slow cooking ribs or pulled pork that he had been working on perhaps as early as 3 a.m. And then once everyone has arrived and the food is ready, to just sit back and enjoy the company of the people around him. The third aspect about Chris that I want to just mention briefly is his obvious love and his passion for his family. The people in his family were the most important people on the planet for Chris. He loved growing up in Gander and all that he had there, including putting in the first curling rink and throwing his first rock at 18 months old, to moving out west in 1986 and marrying the love of his life, Tilly. Tilly told me they met at a curling rink. Fairly fitting, I think. And you told me that you were impressed at his skill and his passion for the game, and that you just had to get to know this guy a little bit more. Well, that first conversation led to a first date eventually, and that first date led to another, and then it led to the fact that the two of you stood before each other in 1987 to commit lifelong vows to one another. So incredible. It ended up being 39 years of marriage and 43 years together. It's a lot of life, Tilly. And Stephanie and Adam, you don't need me to tell you just how incredible and special you were in your father's eyes. I love that he spoke with pride of the two of you whenever people would listen. And as we spoke last week, I love the pride to which you spoke of your father. You are who you are today, in large part because of what your father has instilled in you. I think I mentioned this as well when we met. Not everyone here I know can say they've got a good father, but I'm glad you do. And I'm glad that you have a legacy that is following with you from this day forward. Chris was loved in his life. He is loved in his passing. And he will be remembered for the rest of our days here on earth. Let's reflect on Chris through these pictures at this time.
If you want, you can marry. Look at me. I am old, but I'm happy. I was once like you are now, and I know that it's not easy to be calm when you found something going on. But take your time, think a lot. Why think of everything you've got? For you will still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not. How can I try to explain? When I do, he turns away again. It's always been the same old story. From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen. Now there's a way, and I know that I have to go away. I know I have to go. It's not time to make a change. Just sit down, take it slowly. You're still young, that's your fault. There's so much you have to go through. Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry. Look at me. I am old, but I'm happy. All the times that I've cried, keeping all the things I knew inside. It's hard, but it's harder to ignore it. If they were right, I'd agree, but it's them they know, not me. Now there's a way, and I know that I have to go away. I know I have to go.
I didn't know where to look for you last night. I didn't know where to find you. I didn't know how I could touch that light that's always gathering behind you. I didn't know that I would find a way to find you in the morning. But love can't pull you out of yesterday, as it takes you without warning. I wanna be a longtime friend to you. I wanna be a long time known, not one of your memories used to be. The summer's fading song. It's from me, it's to you, for your eyes. It's a way, a wonder that is why. with the golden moon arising, and the stars will fall around us still, while the love is realizing. So it is until we meet again, and I throw my arms around you. You can count the gray hairs in my head. I'll still be thankful that I found you. It's from me, it's to you, for your eyes. It's a way, wonder that is why I am here. You are there. Love is our cross to bear. Love is our cross to bear.
Wasn't that good? I know it took a few runs to get it going, but it was well worth it to reflect. As we close this portion of our time today, I want to reiterate that we say goodbye today. And that as we do, that Chris is close in our hearts and he will not be forgotten. Today is a hard day, and there's hard days ahead. But we take them one step at a time. And perhaps in this, to embrace the mystery of the questions to which we will never understand. But I pray for peace, especially over the family in this time. And I want to say, though, that while we do say goodbye today in a very tangible way, we know that also in a very real way, Chris does go with us as we go. He goes with us to our homes, to our workplaces, to the next pension meeting, to our routines, and to the rhythms of life that we keep. And so my only encouragement is this, is to keep him alive in your memories. Keep him alive in your conversations. As emotional as it may be to do so, do it. It's worth it. Every single time. Chris will always be remembered. At the family's request, I want to recite the Lord's Prayer as the second to closing activity that I'm going to do. If you know the Lord's Prayer, you're more than welcome to recite it aloud with me. I think it's beautiful. If you don't know it, obviously that's fine. Just receive these words. But after I finish saying it, we're going to watch about a 4 or 5 minute video of a prayer that the family has found that they want to just reflect on for all of us before we go. I just want to encourage you just to remain seated. We're going to watch the video, and then when it's done, to continue to stay seated as Svetlana, our funeral director, comes to get the family to go to the reception. There is a reception here because Chris would not have it any other way, I am sure. And there is going to be more food than people here for sure, too. So for as long as you can stay, if you can, you're more than welcome to. But I also want to let you know the guest book will be available. If you didn't have a chance to sign it before you came in, it will be over there at the guest book or the reception to do so. And I think this show will be continuing to loop there as well. This is the Lord's Prayer. In response to people asking Jesus, they said, Jesus, how can we pray? And Jesus said, this is how you can pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Let's watch together.
So ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to replay that. Just give us like maybe 2-3 minutes. I just need to get somebody, okay? Thank you.
When tomorrow starts without me, and I'm not there to see, if the sun should rise and find your eyes all filled with tears for me, I wish so much you wouldn't cry the way you did today, while thinking of the many things we didn't get to say. I know how much you love me, as much as I love you, and each time that you think of me, I know you'll miss me too. But when tomorrow starts without me, please try to understand that an angel came and called my name and took me by the hand and said my place was ready in heaven far above, and that I'd have to leave behind all those I dearly love. But as I turned to walk away, a tear fell from my eye. For all my life I'd always thought I didn't want to die. I had so much to live for, so much left yet to do. It seemed almost impossible that I was leaving you. I thought of all the yesterdays, the good ones and the bad. I thought of all the love we shared and all the fun we had. If I could relive yesterday, just even for a while, I'd say goodbye and kiss you, and maybe see you smile. But then I fully realized that this could never be. For emptiness and memories would take the place of me. And when I thought of worldly things I might miss come tomorrow, I thought of you, and when I did, my heart was filled with sorrow. And when I walked through heaven's gates, I felt so much at home. When God looked down and smiled at me from his great golden throne, he said, "This is eternity, and all I have promised you. Today, your life on earth is past, and here life starts anew. I promise no tomorrow, but today will always last. And since each day is the same, there's no longing for the past. You have been so faithful, so trusting and so true. Though there were times you did some things you knew you shouldn't do. But you have been forgiven, and now at last you're free. So won't you come and take my hand and share my life with me? So when tomorrow starts without me, don't think we're far apart. For every time you think of me, I'm right here in your heart.